This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome Rabbi Glatstein. Tonight is our last year before the Yom Tov of Shavuos, Haba Aleinu L'Taiva. And Shavuos, of course, is the Yom Tov of Kabbalas HaTorah. So we're trying to do whatever we can to upgrade, to enhance our commitment to learning and our mechanism of learning and our Limud Torah in general. And we're searching and we're mavakesh, what practical steps can we take to try to have an aliyah, to try to have an elevation in Limud HaTorah. By way of introduction, let's just point out that learning Torah is very, very different than any other discipline. At first glance, l'chayra, one would think, learning is probably like learning any topic, be it science, mathematics. And let's say a person wanted to be successful, let's say in their laboratory, and a person was searching for a way to improve their skills. You tell the guy basically that you have it or you don't. Either you have the intellectual capacity or you don't have the intellectual capacity. Either you have the training and the skills or you don't. There's very little you could do in terms of upgrading your level of improving your study and your development in other disciplines. And yet we're going to see, it's quite interesting that when it comes to Limud Torah, there seems to be many different steps and ingredients that are counterintuitive and sort of defy logic. One would never think that these would be ingredients that would improve one's learning. And what we're going to see is, obviously, learning is not like any other discipline. Obviously, learning is the seichel eloki, is the mind of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and therefore the ingredients that go into be successful in learning are very, very different than the ingredients that go into being successful in any other endeavor. Okay, so with this, we will begin. I remember when I was a kid, I was a bacher, I used to basically sneak out of yeshiva, and I would go to Rav Victor Miller, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. Not the worst, right? It's a pretty good place to sneak out to. And I remember I once asked him, in davening, we say, Harachamon hu yizakenu limois hamashiach u'lechaye ha'olam haba. Hashem, give us the privilege to get olam haba. And I remember I asked Rav Miller, why would we need to daven for olam haba? If you do mitzvahs, you get olam haba. And if you don't do mitzvahs, you won't get olam haba. Why would it be something you daven for? And I remember he said, you only have to daven for it if you want it. You can't get anything in this world if you don't daven for it. And that's a klal gadol. Whether you need health, or hatzlacha with children, or parnasa, or shidduch, whatever a person needs, you need to daven. Without Fila, nothing in this world works. And yet, David HaMelech says in Perek Lamed Beis in Tehillim, says David HaMelech, Al zahoyis yispalel kol chassid eilecha liyes mitzai. For this, every righteous person should daven. Al zois, for this. Which implies that even though you need to daven for absolutely everything, which means, when you get in the car tonight to go home, you need to daven. Hashem, get me home safely. When you drive to shul in the morning, you need to daven. Hashem, get me to shul safe. Whatever you do, you need to daven for. That's a klal gadol. And yet, David HaMelech says, Al zois yispalel kol chesed. Daven for this. More than anything else in this world, you need to daven for zois, for this. What is zois? Says the Gemara in Brachas Daf Ches. Rav Nosson Omer, le'eis mitzai zu Torah. Mitzai refers to Torah. That when David HaMelech says, Al zois yispalel kol chassid eilecha le'eis mitzai. Daven for this means Torah. Shenemar ki moitzai matzah chayim. Torah is life. In other words, it's a very big chiddush. Most people, if you ask most people, so what are you davening for in Shema Koleinu? Yeah, when you close your eyes and you start davening for a few seconds, personal bakashas. What are you davening for? I don't know, shalom bayis, good children, parnasa, whatever we're davening for. No, you blew it. You got it wrong. These are not the most important things to daven for. The most important thing to daven for is to be successful in learning Torah. What do you mean to daven? I'll open up the Gemara and I'll learn. No. You need to have the clarity of mind. You need to have the health. You need to have the right Rebbe. You need to have the right Shiur. You need to have the right circumstance. There are many, many ingredients that are required to be successful in learning. And therefore, more than anything else in life, you don't come into the shul and look, let me look for something to say that would be a good skula for Parnasa. if that's what you're davening for, if that's your main focus, you got it wrong. The most important thing to daven for in this world is to be successful in learning. The Gemara in Masechta Nida says, Ma yasa adam v'yechkam. The Gemara Nida daf ayin. What should a person do to become wise? So the Gemara says, you want to become wise? Very simple. Yarba b'yeshiva. Sit and learn. V'yamait b'schayra. Don't work too much. Learn a lot, and don't spend too much time working. You'll become wise. So the Gemara says it doesn't work. Harbe asukein v'lei hoylem. Look, I know a lot of people that don't work. They're not big Tamei Chacham. I know a lot of people that sit and learn. They're also not big Tamei Chachamim. Says the Gemara, just sitting and learning will not make you into a Talmid Chacham. What do you need to do? Ela yevakshu rachamim imisha chachma shaloi. You need to daven for mercy from the one who wisdom belongs to. You need to daven. In other words, the most important ingredient in being a Talmid Chacham is tefillah. If I were to ask you, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Chazoin Ish, what made them such a big Talmid Chacham? They're brilliant. They worked with tremendous amelos. We're learning a chiddush now. The most important ingredient in being great in learning Torah is tefillah. Without tefillah, you can't learn. So imagine you have a guy in a laboratory, and he's sitting with the microscope. He's trying to discover a cure for a disease. Or imagine a physicist, and he's harving. You tell him, you know why you don't chap E equals MC squared? Because you didn't daven enough. Say, Meshugano, you crazy? What's that got to do with biology, with physics, with mathematics, tefillah? And the answer is, you're right, it has very little to do with it. But Torah is not a regular discipline. Torah is not just an intellectual discipline where if you have the intellectual faculty, you're going to be good. I remember a lot of people who were very, very smart. The Torah didn't enter. And you get vice versa. I know people who were below average intellect, and they were very successful in Limud Torah. Because Torah is not a regular discipline. It's a very important ingredient. You want to be successful in learning. A person says, it doesn't go. I try. I open up the Gemara. I don't have cheshek. It's not for me. Well, wait a second. Did you put in the first ingredient in learning? Do you daven to be? No, I don't daven, but learning is not for me. How would you even know? If you don't daven, you haven't even gotten to first base in Limud HaTorah. The most important ingredient in Limud HaTorah is tefillah. It's very interesting. There's a Mishnah Masechta Brachos, and this we sort of digress to discuss somewhat of a halachic topic. There was a Tana by the name of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, besides being a Tana, also wrote a Sefer of Kabbalah, wrote the Sefer Hakana. And Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, the Mishnah says, when he would enter the Beis HaMedrash, he would daven. And he would leave the Beis HaMedrash, he would daven. So they said to him, what are you doing? Why are you davening? You're about to learn Gemara. Why are you davening? Why would you daven when you leave? So he said, when I enter, I daven shelo yera dvar takala al yadi. And when I leave, I thank Hashem for my share. And the Gemara says, what would he say when he would enter? He would say, Yiratzim ufanecha, Hashem lekai, shelo yera dvar takala al yadi, v'lo echshav dvar halacha, v'yismechu bi chaveri. I shouldn't stumble, and I shouldn't make a mistake, and my friends rejoice, and I shouldn't say, v'lo al tamei tar, v'lo al tar tamei, v'lo al mutar asr, v'lo al asr mutar. Okay. Anybody ever see this tefillah? Every Gemara in the world. When I was a kid, so the old Gemaras, I don't think the old Gemaras had it in it, so the Rabbeim would give out a sheet. But if anybody needs the tefillah, I made a copy for you. It's over here. You get a free copy, no extra charge. You can have a copy of the tefillah of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Nowadays, every single Gemara in the world has the tefillah of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana in it. And then at the end, when he would leave, he would say, Maidani l'fanecha, shesamta chelkim miyoshe beis hamedrash, v'lo samta chelkim miyoshe kranois. And that everyone's familiar with. That's what we say at a siyum. So if you make a siyum, let's say once every 73 years, when you make a siyum, or if you make it more often, even better, this is the tefillah that, according to Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, you should say every single day. Marav Rabbi Sai, did you ever see anybody say this tefillah? Yeah, I remember when I was in yeshiva, I was learning in kollel, or I was in Beis Medrash. So you're sitting in the Beis Medrash all day. You have 15 hours a day. So you come in, you open up the Gemara, and you say the tefillah. And at the end of the day, if you remember, you say the tefillah. In the good old days, I used to say this tefillah. But anybody see people in shul say this tefillah before a shiur? You know, most people before a shiur, they're very busy collecting different items on their plate. But do you ever see people open up a Gemara before the learning and say, Yiratzei milfanecha Hashem alekav? What happened to the tefillah of Reb Nechunya ben Akana? I see people saying other tefillahs that are posted on the wall, which are not mentioned in Shas. Why doesn't anybody say a tefillah that actually it says and talks about in the Torah? What happened to this tefillah? Maybe in the new building we should have a new sponsorship. Say, by the way, anybody right now wants to sponsor the tefillah of Nechunya ben Akana, it's available. What? Yitzi for Yitzi's going to sponsor for 10,000. Okay, very good. So, what happened to this tefillah? What happened to the tefillah, Yitzi? Why doesn't anybody say the tefillah? So you say, I don't know, maybe Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, he didn't mean you have to say it. Maybe he's just suggesting that it's a good idea. If you look at the Rambam and the Parsha HaMishnayos, the Rambam and the Parsha HaMishnayos, look at number 6, in number 5, it says the Rambam, Kishe Yichnas Beis HaMedrash, Ma Chayiv Loimar, what do you have to say? So the Rambam saying you're mechuyev to say the tefillah. The Shulchan Aruch even codifies, Hanichnas Beis HaMedrash, Yispalel Yihiratzei Milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu Melkei Avoseinu. So why don't people say this tefillah? So maybe you'll say, well, people don't say this tefillah because we're not such big paiskim. You know, if you're a big paisik and somebody's asking you shilas and you're learning Yoreh De'ah and people are asking you tamei, tahar, mutar, asur, so you need to daven that you shouldn't make a mistake. But most people who are learning in a shul, they're learning lamdus, they're learning Gemara, they're not learning halach l'maisa, nobody's asking them shilas, so maybe this tefillah is not so critical. By the way, the Taz writes, look at number 7, says the Taz, Nirali, du adin b'mishi yashav lomad afilu b'yichidus. Even someone learning by themselves, even if they're not paskening, would be required to say this tefillah. So the question is, Rabbi Glatstein, what happened to the tefillah of Reb Nechunya ben Akana? So we have over here a few justifications and a few rationalizations why this tefillah is not really noigea so much bizman hazeh. First of all, you have the Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Kuf Yud, Siv Katan Tez Zayin. Look at number 8. The Aruch HaShulchan says, 5 lines from the bottom, he says, Ve'achshav lo noagu bazeh. Nowadays, the minhag is not to say the tefillah. Now you have to know, when a posek writes the words lo nohagu does not mean the minhag should not be that way. You have to, this is a klal in learning Shulchan Aruch. Lo nohagu doesn't mean it should not be this way. Lo nohagu means the people just don't do it, even possibly incorrectly. But the Aruch HaShulchan is reporting the fact, lo nohagu, and says the Aruch HaShulchan, the reason is as follows. The Aruch HaShulchan says something very interesting. The Aruch HaShulchan says this tefillah is primarily for paiskim. And the lashon of the Mishnah is, b'chnisasai lebeis hamedrash, when you enter the shul, when you enter the beis medrash. So Hagabah Atzmacha, says the Aruch HaShulchan, miman of shach, maybe we don't have to say this tefillah anymore. Why? Because the people learning in the shul, they're not paskening shilas. Elamai, the paiskim are paskening shilas, they're not sitting in shul, they're in their house. So miman of shach, maybe we don't have to say the tefillah. Those who are nichnas into the beis medrash are not being moira hayra, and those who are moira hayra are not entering the beis medrash. So they don't fit the technical requirements of this tefillah, says Aruch HaShulchan, and that is what he suggests is the reason why many people do not say this tefillah bizman hazeh. The Ritva, when he is ma'atik the words of the Gemara, the Ritva says, Reb Nechunya ben Akana haya mispalel. Says the Ritva, what does this mean, haya mispalel? Va'ashma'ina, and the Chiddush is, Demi sheroitze loimar hachi harashus biyadai. That if you want to say this tefillah, you're allowed to. Meaning, Reb Nechunya ben Akana is not saying you're required to say the tefillah. Reb Nechunya ben Akana is saying you're allowed to say the tefillah. So you say, why would you not be allowed to say the tefillah? What's he coming to? Why would I think that you would not be allowed to say the tefillah? So you have to know that just because the tefillah is in a siddur or is in a book, it doesn't mean you should say it or you can say it. A tefillah, you can't just say tefillahs. You can't just say random things in Lashon HaKodesh. if the tefillah is documented in the Gemara, in Shas, and Tarsha Bal Peh, so it's a valid tefillah. If the tefillah has no makar, then you shouldn't say it. So Rabbi Glatstein ben Akana is saying that this is a tefillah that you're allowed to say, but you're not required to say. That's how the Ritva learns. Again, the Rambam does not learn that way. The Rambam says that this tefillah is a chiyuv, but nevertheless, the Ritva, when he's matik the words of the Gemara, the Ritva says this is an optional tefillah. That's according to the Aruch HaShulchan. According to the Aruch HaShulchan, he's just justifying why the minhag is not necessarily to say the tefillah, because he says it's for people paskin shalas. The people paskin shalas are at home; they're not entering the base medrash, and the people who are entering the base medrash are not paskin shalas. But again, if you want to say the tefillah every morning before you get, before you come to shul, then matov u'manoim. Okay, and finally, a third justification, Rabbi Isai, why the minhag seems to be not to say the tefillah, is if you turn to the back of Masechta Brachos, you have little Hagois at the end of the Masechta from Re'im Horowitz. Any Horowitzes over here? Not yet. So in the Hagois, in the back of it, you have like these little microscopic Hagois. In the Hagois, Re'im Horowitz, he writes that since we say every morning Ahava Rabbah, or if those who say Avas Olam, he happens to say Ahava Rabbah, but whatever your nusach is, in Ahava Rabbah, he says, you say, V'sein b'libeinu lahavin ulahaskel l'shmaya lumad olamed. So basically it's a tefillah. You're asking the Rebbeinu Shem, you're mavakesh, that Hashem should help you, give you the understanding to understand the Torah. That is in lieu, that takes the place, that helps us fulfill the obligation of the tefillah of Rabbi Glatstein ben Akana. In other words, Avas Olam, Ahava Rabbah is a replacement. It covers us of the obligation of the tefillah of Rabbi Glatstein ben Akana. And at night, Avas Olam, you see Avas Olam in the morning, Ahava Rabbah in the morning is a bakasha. V'sein b'libeinu lahavin ulahaskel l'shmaya lum alamed. That's in lieu of Yihiratzah Mufanach shel Yera Dvar Takal al Yadi. And in the evening is the Birchas HaTorah is thanking Hashem for the Torah. So that's in lieu of the Moida Anil Fanecha Shesamta Chelki Miyoshvei Beis HaMedrash. But it's not a good sign to have Shiur. You mean according to this reason then, Avi wants to know, so how people are going to come to 6:45 Shiur before Shachas? We learn Mishnah Berurah, Dirshu every morning, Monday through Friday, 6:45. And we're starting, by the way, Siman Reish Chaf Hei, Eretz Hashem, next Monday, a new Inyan, and we're starting Chela Gimel in the summer. Anybody who wants to join, shkach for the plug. You could, the answer, this justification would obviously only work if you're learning after davening. Okay, so that's not what the Hagois for Eim Horowitz is saying. He's not using Berachas HaTorah, he's using Ahava Rabbah. If you want to use Berachas HaTorah, then you could start to ask. So, Rabbi Glatstein ben Akana certainly said Berachas HaTorah, so why did he have to add another two? I mean, even on Re'im Horowitz, you could ask, he also said Ahava Rabbah and Avas Olam. Okay. Bottom line is, there seems to be some justification for why the minhag is not to say the Yihiratzain. However, in the Sefer Orchos Rabbeinu, which are the minhagim of the Stipler, he brings down over here that he heard from the Chazon Ish that somebody who wants to be matzliach in his learning, he should say the Yihiratzain before and the Moed Anil Fanecha after. Moed Rabbi say, I am not here tonight to tell you to say the tefillah. That's not the point I'm trying to convey. If you want to say the tefillah, beautiful matay manam. You don't want to say the tefillah, Aruch HaShulchan already says that the minhag doesn't seem to be say it. The point here is that a very critical ingredient in learning Torah is davening. So whether you say this tefillah, or whether you make your own bakasha, or you have more kavana by Berachas HaTorah or by Avas Olam, whatever it is, you have to understand Torah is different than every other pursuit. As critical as tefillah is to everything we do in this world, it is a central ingredient in learning Torah. And if a person wants to be successful in learning, they must realize the importance of tefillah. Okay, we move on to point number 2, the second ingredient to be successful in learning Torah. Says the Gemara in Yuma, Daf Ayin Beis Amud Beis Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan. My dichsiv, what does it mean in Mishlei? Lama zeh mechir biyad ksil. Why is the merchandise in the hands of the fool? Liknois chachma, to acquire wisdom, v'leiv ayin. Says the Gemara, Oy lahem l'soinein shal talmidei chachamim. This is a euphemism. Woe to the enemies of the Talmidei Chachamim, meaning woe to people who study Torah, sha'oiskim ba'Torah ve'ein bahem yira shamayim. Meaning the Gemara is saying that the Rebbeinu Shalom wonders why the merchandise is in the hands of the fool. What's the merchandise? Torah. Who's the fool? People who don't have yira shamayim. In other words, if a person doesn't have yira shamayim, they could learn and learn and learn, and they could be brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. The Torah does not enter their system. Now let me explain. There are a lot of people that the Torah enters their brain, but it's not enough. For the Torah to course through your veins, to the Torah to become part of you, to be integrated into your personality, you need additional ingredients. And the ingredient is Yiras Shamayim. It says in Mishnah Perkei Avos, Koshe Yiras Chetoi Koidemes L'Chachmasai Chachmasai Miskayemes. If you have the fear of God, and the fear of God precedes your Torah will last. If the Yiras Shamayim does not precede your Chachma, the Chachma will not last. Says Gemara Masechta Shabbos. Let's try to understand. What in the world is the role of Yiras Shamayim in learning Torah? Imagine you tell Einstein. Einstein is harving. He's trying to figure out the theory of relativity. You say, pal, you know why you're not getting it? Because you don't fear doing an Aveira enough. Azoi, he says, really? That's why I'm not getting it. You say, you're crazy. What does one thing have to do with the other? So why would Yiras Shamayim affect a person who learns Torah? What effect does Yiras Shamayim have to do with Torah? So the Gemara explains. The Gemara in Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph. The Gemara darshans V'haya Emunas Yitecha Choisen Yeshuais Chachmas Vadas. And the Gemara says these 6 expressions refer to Shishay Sidrei Mishnah. Zroim, Moyed, Nashim, Nezikim, Kodshim, Taras. By the way, out of the 6 Siddharim, how many do you need to learn? Only 6. Only 6 of them. See, it's too big. There are too many Mishnahs. So learn 2 a day, and you'll do it in 6 years. Or learn 1 a day, and you'll do it in 12 years. Or learn half a day, and you'll do it in 24 years. Or learn a quarter a day, and you'll do it in 50 years. But figure out a plan, by the time you're off the planet, how you're going to do it. That's what we're here for. Everybody according to their level. If you do a quarter of a Mishnah a day, you'll get there. You'll eventually finish it. But figure out how you're going to do it. But says the Gemara, Va'afilu hachi yiras Hashem hi oitzarai. This is the merchandise. But the question is, if a person goes to a store and he doesn't have a shopping wagon, so he could have all the merchandise in the world, he can't carry, he can't move it. So the question is, what is the shopping wagon? What is the storehouse for Torah? And the Gemara says the storehouse for Torah is Yiras Shamayim. The more Yiras Shamayim you have, the more Torah you'll have. Why? But I'm not smart enough. I'm not motivated enough. I'm too lazy. What does Yiras Shamayim got to do with learning? You're telling me if I work on my Yiras Shamayim, I'm going to know more Torah? How? I'm not learning more. Here, imagine a guy, he learns 15 minutes a day. So we say, you want to know more Torah? Have more Yiras Shamayim. Yeah, but how? I'm not increasing the amount of time I'm learning. So listen carefully. Who teaches us Torah? Baruch atah Hashem hamelamed Torah li'ama Yisrael. Whoever it is, whether your Rebbe, your Rabbi, your Rav, your Rosh Hashiva, your Rebbe. But bottom line is, the Rebbeinu Shalom is ki Hashem yitein chachma mipiv. So says the Nefesh HaChaim in Parak Daled, in Shar Daled, Parak Daled. Says Rav Chaim Volozhiner, the Rebbeinu Shalom is Avinu of Harachaman. He's our merciful Father. And He wants nothing more than to shower Klal Yisrael with Yedias HaTorah. But let's give a mashal, says the Nefesh HaChaim. Imagine you're a father, and you have a bunch of kids, and you want to give them money. Every father wants to give their child money. Which child is getting the most money? You have a bunch of kids. Who are you going to give the money to? The oldest, the smartest, the youngest, the cutest. Wrong, 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 wrong. The most money goes to the one who actually will not lose the money. The more responsible the kid who has a wallet and a pocket, he's getting the most money. The baby, you're giving nothing to because they're going to lose it in a second. It's the same thing with Torah. Who does Rebbeinu Shalom give Torah to? Someone who has a container and won't lose it. The container of Torah is Yiras Shamayim. So the more Yiras Shamayim, the more Torah Hashem will give you. And therefore, says Reb Chaim, now you have to understand, this is the central machlokes between the Olam HaYeshivos and Chasidus. Nowadays, nobody knows what the machlokes is about, nobody remembers, and nobody really cares. But you have to understand what it is. This is what the Nefesh HaChaim writes. This was the central machlokes. Learning Torah is purely intellectual. There is no emotion involved in learning Torah. Whether you like it, you don't like it, you agree, you don't agree, it's the truth. So you could agree or you could choose to disagree with the truth. Torah is not an emotional experience. When you learn Gemara, what in the world are you doing? What do you mean, Are you crazy? You have to think, what's the Gemara's kasha? What is the Gemara asking? You only use your brain. Your heart is not involved in learning Torah. But you need Yiras Shamayim. You need to fear Hashem. So says the Nefesh HaChaim, Chas v'sholom, in other words, if you see a guy learning and his pupil of his eye is rolled back into his head as if he's davening, so he's not learning, he's not davening, and I don't know, I know people who he could see. But learning is a purely intellectual pursuit. But it has to be accompanied by Yiras Shamayim, says the Nefesh HaChaim. And that means, he writes as follows, before a person begins to learn, they need to try to think, they should try to think for a moment about that Hashem watches a person and knows a person's actions and knows a person's thoughts, and there's reward and there's punishment and there's a tachas b'olam hazeh, and for a moment to spend time being mizdabek l'bayrai. Learning Torah is not about being mizdabek in a spiritual communion with God. Maybe that's tefillah, but it's not limanat Torah. Limanat Torah is using the mind. However, you have to precede it. Kol she Yerasai kaidemes lechachmasai, chachmasai miskayemes. And even Reb Chaim Lezner writes, if in the middle of learning a person feels that they're losing the purity of the learning, they're losing the connection, so you're allowed to take a moment to stop, to refocus, and to tell yourself, explain to yourself what I'm doing. I'm learning the Torah of Hashem. This is the Dvar Hashem. Abayi's kasha is the word of Hashem, and that will help you refocus and understand what you're in the middle of, what you're embarking upon. However, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, while you're learning, understand learning is the mind, but it needs to be preceded by Yiras Shamayim. So that is ingredient number 2. Ingredient number 2 is Yiras Shamayim. Okay, we move on to number 3. Okay, so here you have a guy, and we're going to tell him the following. The first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. Yeah, I'm sure everybody got up to that Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. There's just one problem. Moshe was not mekabel the Torah from Sinai. Sinai did not give Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah. It should say Moshe kibel Torah mei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It could say maybe Moshe kibel Torah ba Sinai or kishabala Sinai. But what in the world does it mean Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai? Mi Sinai means from Sinai. Sinai did not grow arms and write a document and hand it to Moshe Rabbeinu. So this is the kasha of Tosfos. Tosfos is bothered by this kasha. What do you mean Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai? Says Tosfos the following. Everybody remembers the concept that why was Har Sinai chosen to be the location of the giving of the Torah? The Gemara Megillah says in Daf Chav Tes that Har Sinai was the lowest, most unassuming, humblest of all the mountains, and the Rebbeinu Shalom therefore selected Har Sinai to be the location of the giving of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu then learned the lesson from Har Sinai, that even though the Ribono Shel Olam resides in the highest of the heavens, He's Elokeinu Elokim, V'Adoneihu Adonim. Nevertheless, what the location and the type of place that the Ribono Shel Olam likes and feels comfortable with are the humble, the lowly. Moshe, says Tosfos Yeshanim on the Mishnah, Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Mi means because of. Moshe was makabel the Torah. Why was Moshe makabel the Torah? Why not Abraham? Why not Yitzchak? Why not Yaakov? There are a lot of great people. What? Mi Sinai. He was makabel the Torah because of the lesson that he learned from Sinai. In fact, the Gemara says in Masechta Tainis, which beverage is Torah similar to? Mayim. Hoy kol tzamei l'chula mayim. Loi malach. Ma mayim. Manichim makoim gavaya v'holchim l'makoim namach. Water always rolls down to the lowest place. Torah always goes down to the lowest place. So you could have two guys. You could have two people. They both learn an hour a day. They both have the same amount of Yiras Shamayim. They're both equally intelligent. And one of them could know much, 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 much more Torah than the other. Why? Because Ruvain is very humble, and Shimon is not as humble. So you ask, what in the world does humility got to do with Torah? Imagine, you have a physicist, and you say, you'd be much more successful in understanding your subject if you'd be humble. Say, you're insane. What does humility is a personality trait, is a characteristic. What does it have to do with the intellectual discipline? But Torah is different. Torah has supernatural ingredients. The humbler someone is, the more they'll be successful in learning Torah. So now let's give a mashal, because we said that Yiras Shamayim is receptacle, right? So what's the role of humility? So in other words, the information is the Torah. The Torah needs a receptacle. The receptacle is Yiras Shamayim. So what is the humility exactly? So Chaim Volozhiner, in his commentary to Pirkei Avos, says incredibly, in Parak Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, the humility is the thickness of the receptacle. If someone has the first thing we have to really explain is, what is humility? What's humility? Does humility mean to sit in the back of the shul? Does humility mean to rub your hands together and put your head down a little bit? And what is humility? What does it mean? So the Mesilas Yesharim writes 3 words. The definition of humility is Loi Nava Sihila. That you're not worthy of praise. Meaning it doesn't mean a person doesn't know his capabilities and his achievements and his talents. But the moment a person thinks, and therefore I should be praised, and therefore people should recognize me, therefore I deserve special treatment, that's gaiva. Humility is to understand that you're not deserving of praise. The world existed 3,000 years before you. The world will live on after you. And probably by the time you're gone, nobody will even know you were here. Humility is to understand you're not deserving of praise. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, the more humble you are, the more Torah you will know. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, amazing words. Look in number 22 in the second paragraph. V'ha'inyan, ki al yedei anava zoicha ha'adam ha'koel. Through humility, a person achieves all spiritual benefits. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, all of his greatness, he was the greatest Navi, he was the greatest Marbitz Torah, he was the greatest Lamdin. Lo yinishtabeach elo ba'anova. The only thing nice the Torah says about Moshe is v'ha'ish Moshe onov ma'oid mikol adam shemay adama. Think about it. We could have said v'ha'ish Moshe talmid chacham ma'oid mikol adam shemay adama. V'ha'ish Moshe lamdin ma'oid mikol adam shemay adama. We could say v'ha'ish Moshe yorei shamayim. No, we say v'ha'ish Moshe because the anivus is what caused all of his greatness in all spiritual levels. And then the Nefesh HaChaim says, Hafla v'fela. In other words, let me ask you a question. What's the difference between me and you and Moshe Rabbeinu? In other words, why are we not Moshe Rabbeinu? What are we lacking that we're not Moshe Rabbeinu? I don't know. We don't have the brain power. We don't have the Yerushalayim. We don't have the Devekus. We don't have the Kedusha. It says in Nefesh HaChaim, no. Kol ma shezacha bavur anvasai. Everything that Moshe achieved was because of humility. Be'ilu haya achshav adam anav k'Moshe. If today, 2017, you could find someone as humble as Moshe, vaday zoicha l'Torah b'shleimos. He would know the Torah like Moshe. In other words, the reason why this Gadol Hador and that Gadol Hador is not on the level of Moshe is only because they're not as self-effacing and as humble as Moshe. Ingredient number 4. So you have a lot of people learning today. So what happened to them? Why aren't they such big Tamei Chachamim? Number 4, Asei l'cha Rav. Make for yourself a Rebbe. The Mishnah says in Perkei Avos, Parak Aleph, Mishnah Vav. Asei l'cha Rav. Make for yourself a Rebbe. So what do I need a Rebbe for? Art scroll. I have Art Scroll Gemara. Rabbeinu Art Scroll. Rav Hagoyin Art Scroll. Rav Shadenstein. Why do I need a Rebbe? I have Torah Anytime tapes, Torah tapes. I don't know. I learn myself. Why do I need a Rebbe? I'm smarter than the Rebbe. I have more Yerushalayim than the Rebbe. Why do I need a Rebbe? What's that going to do for me? In America, there's a new concept. He's not my president. Everywhere, he's not my rabbi. But you daven in that shul. What is? No, I don't really need him. He needs a job, so he stands up there. But what's it got to do with me? No. Says the Mishnah Avos, Asei l'cha Rav. Now listen carefully. What do you mean make for yourself a rabbi? I'm not on the board. The board made him a rabbi. I'm not even a member. I don't even pay membership. What do you mean make for myself a rabbi? Asei l'cha Rav. What do? I go over to him, I put my magic wand on his head, and I say, here, ta-dam. What's the Mishnah asking me to do? I'm learning. I learn my Daf Yomi. I learn my Amud Yomi. I learn my Mishnah Yomi, Chavetz Chaim Yomi, every Yomi in the world. What do you want me to do now? What do you want for my life? Says Rabbeinu Yoina Iration. Afilu ata yodea kamoisai. You might know as much as this rabbi. The Rambam says further, you know more than the rabbi. Asei oisai Rav alecha. Make him your Rebbe. Mipnei she'adam zoicher ma she'lamad me'rabba yosim ma she'adam loy me'atzvai. You remember what you learned from your Rebbe more than you learned by yourself. Let me explain. This is key. This is what separates the men from the boys. You want to grow in learning, you must have a Rebbe. There's some people, they daven in 30 different shuls and they don't have one Rebbe, and there's some people who daven in one shul and they have 30 different Rebbes. Let me explain what's going on here. Why do I need a rabbi? I'm learning. I'm smart. I learn Shas. What do I need? So let me explain. Very important. This is Yesod Gadol. A human being is not a computer. If a human being was a computer, so you stick the USB cord into one side of your brain, the other side you stick into the Shas, and you have the information. Human being is an emotional being as well. And therefore, human being is affected by a relationship. And therefore, like this, you could learn the Gemara. Yeah, it will enter your mind, but it will not enter your personality. But if you accept someone as your Rebbe, and he doesn't have to be better than you, he could be equal to you, he could be less than you. All you need to do is make the mental note. This is my Rebbe. Oh, he said this is a halacha. Oh, my Rebbe said this is a halacha. My Rebbe taught me this Gemara. I remember Gemaras that I learned from Rabbeim much, much better than things that I learned myself. Because if you have the Hachna and the Kabbalah, that this person is my Rebbe, and it doesn't have to be one person. It could be any Maggid Shiur you go to. You have the understanding that I'm a human being, I'm affected by relationships, and I'm makabel this person as my teacher, as my Rebbe, then what that person teaches you will make an impact on you. But you have to be open to it. You have to have the anivus and the hachna and really the chachma to understand that every human being needs a Rebbe. And you should know, I read a story of Itzla Petterberg, who was one of the Tzadikei Hadar. He was a Talmud Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. When Rabbi Yisrael Salanter died, when Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was nifter, So I think Rabbi Glatstein, I don't know, was in his 70s or maybe his 80s. You would think, someone in their 70s and 80s, they don't need a Rebbe anymore. Him and Rav Naftali Amsterdam, they said, we cannot live in this world without a Rebbe. They went to Rav Shmuel Salant, who I think was younger than them, and they told him, you're our Rebbe. So if a person wants to be successful in learning, if you want the learning to register, so you say, no, I don't want to make him my Rebbe. He should come to me, and he should initiate to me. No, it can't work that way. The mission of it says, Asay, it's up to you. It's up to you. Nobody could impose it. Nobody could force it. Nobody could create it other than yourself. What do you have to do? Nothing. Just the mental note. I am makabel somebody as a Rebbe. If you do that, you'll be successful in what you learn. Okay, ingredient number 5. Ingredient number 5 is like this. No, not necessarily posik. You should have a halachic, you should have somebody to ask shilas to also. Everybody needs someone to ask a shaila to. You can't just pick and choose. But Rebbe means to learn from, to learn Torah, to learn everything. There's a wealth of Torah out there. And if a person's makabel somebody as a Rebbe, you can have a lot of different Rabbeim. You could have a Rebbe in Halacha, you could have a Rebbe in Gemara, you could have a Rebbe in Lamdos, you could have a Rebbe in Psak, you could have a Rebbe in Eitzos. And you should. Person should have. You don't just have to have one person who you go to. Okay, let's try to finish up over here. Okay, ingredient number 5. Ingredient number 5 is like this. If you want to be successful in learning, you got to say the words. Don't just think the words. The Shulchan Aruch Harav writes, the Baal HaTanya writes, Sarich Adam Lizoyer Lahaitzi Bisfasav Lashmiya Laaznav Kol Ma Shalomeh. Whatever you learn, enunciate the words. Chumash, Mishnah, Gemara. Unless you're learning like a Tifa Sugya and you're learning Dakei Ha'in, and in order to concentrate, you need to think, and the saying the words are going to disturb your concentration. Says the Shulchan Harav. Otherwise, if you just sit in front of a Gemara, he says a Chiddush Naira, if you sit in front of a Gemara and you just think the words, you don't get the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. You're not mekayim the mitzvah of learning. The same way, if you sit in front of your siddur and you don't say Shema and you just think Shema, you're not mekayim the mitzvah of Shema. If you just sit in front of a Gemara and you don't say the words, you're not mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So so what in the world am I doing here now? One guy's talking and everybody else is, so the Shulchan Harav says, if you hear somebody else say the words, the same way you could hear Kriyas HaTorah, you could hear Mikra Megillah, you're using the process of Shemei Ka'ina. So when you're learning with Chavrus and Chavrus is saying the Gemara, you are saying the words. You're Mekayim learning through Shemei Ka'ina. By the way, Rosh Zalman Auerbach argues on this, Yisoid, and he says that when you're learning with a Chavrusa, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah through the process of Shemei Ka'ina. Rosh Zalman sort of argues on this idea that if you don't say the words, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But I'm just bringing in, there is such a shita that in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah, you have to actually say the words. And even if we don't necessarily hold like that, but just to see to what length the poskim go as the importance of saying the words. Okay. In fact, it says in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Mem Vav, look at number 26, anyone who's mashmiya koiloi b'shas talmudai, miskayim biyadai. Someone who pronounces the words when he's learning, he'll remember his learning. But if you learn quietly, you will forget. By the way, the Gemara says in Erevin, that who remembers Rav Meir's wife? What was Rav Meir's wife's name? Beruria. So there was a Talmud who was learning quietly. So what did she do? She went over to the Talmud and she gave the Talmud what a kick. She kicked him in the shins and she hurt the Talmud. She said, "You're a nebuchal." The Torah says, arucha bakar l'shmura, that if you learn Torah with all 248 limbs, the Torah will be guarded and preserved. And if you don't learn Torah with all of your limbs, you will forget the Torah. So the question is, what do you mean to learn Torah with all 248 limbs? She seems to be saying that if you say the words of Torah, you're learning Torah with all 248 limbs. How's that? So Maharsha explains that when you say words of Torah, it creates vibrations, and it's like your whole body is learning. It's like your toes are learning, your feet are learning, your knees are learning, your legs are learning, your whole When you say words, think about it, it creates vibrations. It's actually your whole body is learning. And then it's one of the 48 ways to be kind of Torah in the Mishnah Perkei Avos. One of the 48 ways to be kind of Torah is Arichas Sifa Sayim. Okay. Marv Rabbi, we move on. Number 6. So there's, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this probably from Shweki, but it's actually a Gemara. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef Breid Rav Levi, Shamati Shahayu Oimrim. I heard they said Rabbi Yosef went up to Olam Haba, and in Olam Haba he was given a very important piece of information. This is what they said in Olam Haba. Shamati Shahayu Oimrim, Ashrei mi sheba lekan v'talmudoi biyadoi. Fortunate is someone who comes upstairs with his learning in his hand. What does that mean, with his learning in his hand? Says the Marsha, Yesh lefaresh, Iker halimud v'shanasa boi roishem hulimud haba miksivas yad. The main learning that makes an effect on a person is learning that you write. Ashrei mi sheba lekan v'talmudoi biyadoi. What does it mean, talmud biyadoi? The learning that's in your hand. So, the 6th way to be successful in learning is to write. Now, I'm not saying all of a sudden, you're going to go home now and your wife's saying, what are you doing up? It's 1 o'clock. I'm writing a sefer. The rabbi said if you want to be successful in learning, you have to write. Your wife's going to say, yeah, but you have to know something to write. What are you writing? So the point is like this. I'll give you an interesting mashal. Nowadays, everybody's into the latest educational philosophies. So, one of the important educational philosophies is you want to involve as many modalities as possible. They say some students learn visually, some learn audio, you want to involve as many faculties as possible. So the point is, you want to say the words, you want to write, you want to utilize whatever faculty a human being has, you want to be able to utilize to integrate learning. So obviously, people don't have time. Halavai, we should have time to learn. But even if, let's say, at the end of a shiur, take out a pen and write one thing that you learned. So you bring it to the Shabbos table, and you read it to your family. So you wrote, and you said it with your lips. Maybe next year you remember. Next year Shavuos will come. Remember, last year I learned 10 ways to improve my learning. And it will become part of you. Even if a person could do a little bit, I guarantee you, if I were to announce in a few minutes the winning lottery ticket numbers, all of a sudden people are going to say, if I would tell you, write down the shiur, nobody has a pen. But if I would say I'm going to give you the winning lottery ticket numbers, everyone's going to find the pen that they didn't have. You make sure you have a pen. So why should Torah be any less than money? So you go to a shiur, you're learning, take out a pen, take out a pencil, whatever you want to do, write it on your pad, and try to involve the faculty of writing. In fact, one of my favorite vertlach in Rabbi Olbaum's Hakdama to Haggadah, to his Gilyonei Minchas Chein. So he brings a very a nice vart. It says, Asei lecha rav. What are the next words? Ukenei lecha chaver. What does kenei mean? Kenei is a pen. Kenei, your pen. Kenei lecha chaver. Your pen should be your friend. In other words, you should be a frequent to writing things down in Torah. Okay, that is number 6. Number 7. Okay, number 7 is. So they told me that there's this thing that people carry around on their waist, and it buzzes very often. Sometimes people could be sending them, a telegram. Sometimes people could be sending them Morse code, different ways of communication I heard they have. And I heard that it could be interrupting people in middle of a shiur even. They could get a telegram on this device that people wear around their belts. So the question here, this is ingredient number 7, and this is a big problem today. The famous story, Rabbi Akiva went to learn for 12 years. Nebuch, left his wife. They had children. The kid had a bris. Rabbi Akiva didn't go to the bris. Rabbi Akiva didn't go to the pre-1A party. He didn't go to the first grade Mishkan project, the second grade fair, the third grade Avos Subanim. He didn't go ever. Rabbi Akiva missed everything. And Nebuch, his wife, had to care for the kid all by herself. So at the end of 12 years, Rabbi Akiva comes back, and he overhears some Rasha, the Gemara says, talking to his wife, and the Rasha said, get rid of your husband. What kind of husband is? He doesn't pay the bills, he doesn't take care of you, he doesn't take care of the kids. Get rid of him. And she said, everybody knows what she said, if he would go learn for another 12 years, then I would be very happy. So Rabbi Akiva says, Azoi! So he doesn't even say hello to his wife, and he turns around and he goes to learn for another 12 years. He doesn't go to her and say, by the way, who's catering our kid's bar mitzvah next week? Who's paying for it? Where's the kid going to high school? Where's he going to camp? Who's coming visiting day? You're going to be able to drive up to the mountains yourself? Nothing. Rabbi Kiva did not say a word to his wife. No communication for 24 years. Frekt Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, a gavaldige kasha. What about Hakar Satoiv? You know, she's responsible for his learning. Doesn't he not have the courtesy to say, thank you, lady. Thank you for bearing with me. It's all going to be worth it in the end. Just come and say, you know, I'm really learning Geschmack, and it's all because of you. Maybe a nice word. Nothing. Why not? So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says a very important idea. And this is the idea that's, you know, very well known in the Olam HaYeshivos, that 12 plus 12 does not equal 24. That 24 consecutive years is not the same as 12 years, interruption, 12 years. And therefore, Rabbi Kiva felt that if he would stop and discuss with his wife and sit down on the couch for 10 minutes and then go back to the yeshiva, instead of having a one unit of 24 years, he would have two 12-year units. And in Ruchnius, the total sum is much greater than the components. And therefore, says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, when it comes to Talmud Torah, a very important ingredient is being consecutive, being consistent. And therefore, it is basically impossible to be successful in learning if you have your phone on. That's just the reality. You could be learning if you're interrupted by a text, by an email, okay, look, some people, you know, they're on call all the time, emergency. If you have an hour to learn, you cannot have interruptions. You can't take messages, you can't take texts, it's just not the same. An hour of learning is not the same as a minute. If every minute you're checking on something else, the 60 minutes will not add up to the same kedusha as 1 hour. So you say, well, I can't concentrate. So let's just determine one thing. How long are you able to concentrate for? 5 minutes, then learn for 5 minutes, and then do whatever you got to do. You're able to learn for 6 minutes, learn for 6 minutes, and do whatever you got to do. A person says, well, I need to take breaks. No problem. After how much time do you need to take a break? 3 minutes? Try to learn for 3 minutes, and then take your break. To try not to break up your learning as much as possible. You tell your wife, tell your kids, I'm going now to learn now for 10 minutes. I'm not going to be available for 10 minutes. I'm not going to be available for 20 minutes. I'm not going to be available for an hour. Whatever time you dedicate for Talmud Torah, try as much as possible to make it consecutive. Okay, Rabbi Glatstein, number 8. Number 8 is obvious. Everybody knows this. That number 8 is amelos. Amelos, of course. You know, let's say a physicist got up and said, I want to revolutionize science. I came up with this great idea. And one guy gets up, no way. There's no way in the world that your idea could be correct. You didn't work hard enough. So what is working hard enough? I nailed it. I came to the right conclusion. That could be true in every other discipline. In learning, lo yagati umatzasi al tamen. If a person does not put in the effort, he will not be successful. So what does that mean? Torah needs amelos. That means if you're in the middle of learning and you're a little thirsty, gewaldig! Now you have a shot of being successful in your learning. You're a little tired? Beautiful. You're a little hungry? Perfect. Now you have the right circumstances to have a shot about being successful in learning. Now, I'm not saying you should be fasting all day, but nebuch, if you're a little bit thirsty or a little bit tired, so good. So be a man, persevere. At work, you're always in a perfectly well rested and perfectly hydrated and perfectly satiated. For a person to be successful, even bisman hazeh, with all the art scrolls and all the various aids and crutches, there's always room for amelos. Even a person just harvest, puts in the effort, puts in the toil to try to understand. And amelos, everybody knows they have pressures at home, and they're tired after a long day. Gewaldik. If you come out to learn for an extra minute, extra 2 minutes, and you give it the extra push, yagati umatsasi tamen. That's a very important ingredient in being successful in learning. Rabbi say number 9. You ever hear this guy? Yeah, Gemara. Gemara is not for me. I opened it up, I read it, and I don't understand it. Says the Gemara in Masechta Eruvin. Well, look at number 9. Okay, give me 4 more minutes and we'll wrap it up. Says the Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Sadik Tes. Rabbi Shiur ben Karcha Omer. Kol haloi mei Torah ve'enoi chayzer aleh. Anyone who learns and does not review is like somebody who plants and doesn't harvest. We're at number 43. If you learn and you don't review, it's like a guy who plants and doesn't harvest. You have a guy, he scientifically created the best seed to plant corn. This corn is going to be the plumpest, the fattest, the juiciest corn. So he plants and he grows these massive corns. And at the end of the season, he has nothing to eat. So you say, pal, what happened? So I don't know. So, by the way, did you harvest? Did you bring the corn? Oh, I forgot. I forgot to cut off the corn and bring it inside. Shaita Shaba Olam. So, your special seeds are not going to do you any good. So a person could learn and learn and learn and learn. It doesn't work. It doesn't enter. It doesn't affect. Because if you don't review what you learn, then it's like planting without reaping. So here's a very interesting thing. The Gemara Masechta Eruvin says, just to make a long story short, that Moshe Rabbeinu was taught the Torah from Hashem, and then Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to Aaron, then Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to Aaron's sons, then Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to the Zakanim, and then Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to Klal Yisrael. That means Moshe taught the Torah 4 times. Aaron heard it 4 times from Moshe Rabbeinu. Then Moshe went out, Aaron taught it to his sons, and Aaron taught it to the Zakanim, and Aaron taught it to Klal Yisrael. So Aaron heard it once from Moshe, and he taught it 3 times. Then Aaron stepped out, and the sons of Aaron taught it to the Zakanim and taught the rest of Klal Yisrael. Basically, the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan Ketzat Seder HaMishnah, Moshe taught it 4 times, Aaron learned it 4 times, the sons learned it 4 times, and the Zakanim learned it 4 times, and Klal Yisrael learned it 4 times. Says the Stipler, from this Gemara we learn that until a person reviews a sugya 4 times, he didn't learn it yet. In other words, I'll tell you a very big chiddush. Here you have a guy. He said, I can't understand the sugya. It's impossible. I say, really? Why? Because I didn't open up the Gemara. No, so that might explain why you don't understand the sugya, because you didn't learn it. So imagine you have a guy who learned the Gemara 3 times. He said, learning is so hard. It's so difficult. Learning is not for me. Well, if you only learned it 3 times, you didn't learn it yet. To be considered learning something, says the Stipler, you see from the Gemara, you need to learn it 4 times. So you say, so how am I going to learn Shas? Slowly. Or review. Or on the way to work, get a tape, get a disc. Figure out, or get someone to summarize it. It's not considered learning until you learn it 4 times. The Gemara compares Chazara, somebody who catches a bird. Right? So you catch a bird. Yeah, he caught 1 bird, he put it here. Put another bird, he put it here. Put a 3rd bird. By the end of the day, he has nothing left, because after he caught the first bird, the bird flew away. The smart catcher, what does he do? He takes the bird, he breaks the wing, so now the bird has nowhere to go. So the Gemara says the same thing. When you learn something and you review it, it's like breaking off the wing. Now you can put it in your back pocket. So review is a very important way of integrating the Gemara in your system. I'm going to tell you a very interesting thing, amazing thing. The Gemara, everybody knows the Gemara says in Chagiga, there's no comparison between 100 times and 101 times. So you say, what do you mean there's no comparison? It sounds pretty similar to me. There's only a difference of 1. So listen very carefully. 2 guys, they learned it once. Now a guy learns it twice. You would think he's only 1 more than the other guy. No, he's 2 more than the other guy. Why? Because the second time he learns, he's learning it again, and he's remembering the first time he learned. So he's really, the second review, or the first review, is like another 2 times. The next time you review, you're adding 4 more times. Why? Because when I'm learning it, I'm remembering the second time, and I'm remembering the second time's memory of the first time, and I'm remembering the first time. You have to think about this. So it's the third review is 4 more times. And the next review is 8 more times. The next review is 16 more times. The difference between 101 and 100 is almost 1 billion times difference. Okay. So that's the 9th ingredient to be successful in learning. Review. Okay, Marav Rabbi Sai, here's the final ingredient. The Gemara says that there is a big dispute between Rabbi Chanina and Reb Chia. Reb Chanina said if the Torah would ever be forgotten, I would give one big pilpul shiur. I have such complex analysis, I would restore the Torah with my pilpul. And Reb Chia said, no, I have a different method. You see, what I would do, I would plant flax, I would make a net, I would catch deer, I would write a Sefer Torah, I would teach 5 children, each one of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. I would take 6 children, I would teach each one of them one of the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Then I would say, now go teach each other. And the Bereshis guy expert, he would teach everyone Bereshis. The Shemais guy, he would teach everyone Shemais. The Zram guy would teach everyone Zram. The Kachim guy would teach everyone Kachim. And these 11 children would restore Torah to Klal Yisrael. So the Maharsha points out, very interesting, why couldn't Reb Chia just teach these kids, teach them all Bereshis, teach them all Shemais, teach them all Vayikra, teach them all Bamidbar, all Devarim, teach them all Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and we're good to go? No! He didn't want to do that. He taught the kid Bereshis. He wanted the kid to be a teacher of Bereshis. Why, says the Maharsha? Because the highest level of learning is teaching. And once a person reaches the level of lelamed, that's the highest level of learning, that will put the Torah in your system more than anything else. So you say, come on, I work for a living. I'm not a Rebbe, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a Rosh Yeshiva, I'm not a Rebbe. How am I supposed to teach? Very simple. You learned something today? You learned the Maharsha? You see somebody in the store? You go over to the guy, and you say, by the way, you want to hear a nice vart? I want to tell you over this Maharsha. Now, he's not listening, he doesn't care, and he can't wait until the conversation is over. You're using him. It's okay. It's okay. But you figure out a way to teach someone. Nobody wants to listen to you? Get a chavrusa who you could teach something to. Whatever it is. You know how to learn a Mishnah? Teach someone a Mishnah. You know how to learn a pasuk in Chumash? Teach someone a pasuk in Chumash. You have nobody? You sit at the Shabbos table, you take out the sheets, take out a Mishnah, take out a Dvar Torah, and you say, by the way, Mishpacha, for the next 5 minutes, next 10 minutes, I want to say something over. I want to say over the 10 ways. I want to say over 5 ways. I want to say over 1 way. I want to tell you over 1 vart. Somebody once came to the Stipler. There's a guy learning in Koilel, and he had the opportunity to be a Magid Shiur. And he tells the Stipler, I don't want to be one of these Magidei Shiur. They don't learn. They just prepare Shiurim. I want to learn. Stipler said, like this. People want to know, how in the world can I review something 101 times? It sounds crazy. How can you possibly review something? Stipler said, if you prepare something to give over, and you give it over, it's equal to 50 times chazara. So tell your wife, when Shabbos afternoon, teach your wife, teach your kid, teach your father, teach your mother, teach your sister, teach the wall. Anybody who's willing to listen. Utilize the opportunity, figure out a way. And that doesn't have to be a big pilpul share. Something that you enjoy, something that you like. The goal here is, you want the Torah not just to be in your brain. You want it to be in your personality. You want it to enter your personality. And all of these are ways to upgrade our level of learning. Whether it's tefillah, whether it's anivos, whether it's your shamayim, whether it's making a rebbe, whether it's saying the words, whether it's writing, consecutive learning, amelos, chazara, teaching. These are all ways to take Torah and bring it from your mind into your heart, into your system, into your veins, that the Torah should be a Torah's chayim and part of our personality. So b'siyata d'shmaya, the Yom Tov, haba aleinu l'tova, should all be zoicha to a greater connection to Limud Torah. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.